Hey, what is going on, everybody? Bauer Brown here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is going to be video number 2 in our Blender tutorial series. Hope you've been following along and it's not been too confusing so far. The video that we're going to be going over today, the subject matter we're going to be reviewing today, I was kind of unsure how I wanted to approach this. One, Blender, not entirely out of my element, but it's kind of is. It's I'm used to Giants Editor and doing things that way. That's kind of what I'm used to, right? That's my home turf, you could say. So Blender, that's a little bit different. Trying to figure out how to approach things and how to teach somebody else how to use a program that I'm lucky I'm able to use myself. All right. Um, all right. So what I decided to do, I was going to jump right into some basic modeling, but I kind of feel like there's just a few more things that maybe you guys should be a little more comfortable with as a beginner, right? So like I said, these guys that are on more of an intermediate level, I apologize because a lot of this is going to just, be monotonous information for you, but I'll try my hardest to keep it interesting if I can. All right. So what I'm looking at now is just my starting screen, right? So if we go up to a new general, right, we'll start with something like this. This is just our starting screen. Starts us with the basic cube in object mode up here on the left-hand side. You can see that. And with each new scene starts with a camera, a cube, and a light. All right. This is in a lot of ways no different than Giants Editor, right? We have a camera. You have that perspective view that you're in. You don't really start with a primitive, but you could add a primitive of any type, whether it's a cube, same types of primitives that you have here, and you have a light. Okay. So you'll find that in a lot of ways that they're very similar. Okay. And, Giants Editor in its own right is a form of a 3D editor. So it kind of makes sense that they're similar. All right. So what I want to go over is just some basic transformations as far as like our mesh object, moving these mesh objects around, stuff like that. Now, looking at it, right, you can see that it's kind of half in and half out of this plane, right? So half of it's below the surface, half of it's above. I know that drives a little, a bunch of people nutty, me as well. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the front orthographic mode by pressing number 1 on my number pad, right? And if this whole thing is not highlighted, when you're in object mode, right, all you'd have to do is click on the object, right? Click on the object and that will highlight it. You can click it in your outliner as well, and that will highlight your object. Now you could in edit mode, if you wanted to select the whole thing, you could press A, but you have to watch in object mode because that selects your camera, your cube, and your light. So that selects everything. So A for all. But right now we'll just settle for click on the object. Now I'm going to go G to grab the object because I want to move it, like so. And I'm going to hit Z to move it along the Z axis. I'm just going to line it up with my red X axis there. All right, so there you go. Now you can see we are now on the ground surface there, right? You could do snapping as well. So if my cube was somewhere else, like, if it's sat lower down, you could turn on snapping when you moved it. So we go G. Oops, actually, let me get that off there. You could do control if you want to. So you can either turn your snapping on here. Up top here, we have the little magnetic horseshoe, or hit G, Z, and then your control button. And as you move it, it will move it snapping. All right. See, now I had mine out of sync, so it's not going to move it exactly to the red line because, of where I had my initial starting point. It moved it in 1 foot increments. Now, like I said, as far as the feet and inches or the metric, as far as feet and inches compared to meters, centimeters, that type of thing, that's going to be entirely up to you. What you feel more comfortable with, with using. Now in object mode, I'll let you know really quick when you hit your N key. Now this is going to bring up, I can look at my dimensions here, right? So I can see that my cube in all dimensions, right, is 6.5 feet, roughly 6.56 feet. All right. Now, if for some reason, let's say if I was on metric, now you can stick with metric. That's not a big deal. Let's go to metric. All right. So you can see I have a 2 meter cube. if I wanted to expand this cube just a little bit, and I'm going to hit S for scale, so you can see that S will S for scale will scale this in all directions at one time. All right. If you wanted to go just a tiny little bit, right? This dimensions will take input in anything, any value that you want, right? So let's say I just wanted to increase the height, my Z dimension, and I only wanted to do it by like let's say instead of 2 meters, I'm not really good with meters. Say I want to go to 8 feet, but I don't know what that is in meters, right? So I can just, instead of doing, the math, I can just hit 8 feet, and there we go. Now it's 8 feet, 2.44 meters. So it'll do the math for you. That's really the only point I wanted to make there, is that it will take inputs of either or, imperial or metric, right? So you can stay on the metric. You can stay on metric, as far as your unit system goes. But if you feel more comfortable, having to input, some imperial measurements, that's fine. It will accept those, right? And you could do inches. So I could have just as easily went like 8 feet, like 6 inches. Well, I guess it would have been 8.5, but either way, you can see that it will take all of those, increments, however you want to type them in there. Right. And then of course, Control Z will let you, bang through undoing everything. It holds pretty many. It holds up to like six different steps. Or not six. I'm sorry, like 50. I don't know why I was thinking six. Yeah, it'll hold like 50 of your latest functions or latest operations, I guess I could say. Don't hold me to that 50. I could be wrong on that, but it's a lot. Just put it that way. All right, so back to our cube here. Now moving around again. Like I said, G is just to grab it. A lot of people want to hit M or something like that. Now G grabs this cube. Now it depends where your cursor's at, right? So if my cursor's hovering over the cube and I hit G, I'm going to move with my cursor over the cube. Now, if I happen to be way up here and I hit G, it'll still move it, but it's going to be kind of weird because my cursor's way up there, right? So when you want to place it, it's left click to just drop it where you want it. Or if you decide you don't want to move it, right click snaps it back to where it was. All right. Now we went over this before, that using your axis identifiers, right? You can move your cube in any axis that you want just by specifying the axis. So instead of being in freehand mode here, if I just want to move it on the X axis, I can, hit X, and I can move it on the X axis, or Y for the Y axis, Z for the Z axis. Okay. Easy enough. Now, if for some reason, like if I have things laid out in such a way, like say I'm in like top view mode, right? And I want to go, I don't know, like 6 feet to the right. Right. So instead of counting everything out, I could actually just tell it to move 6 feet to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to G, because I want to grab it to move. And then I'm going to tell it the axis. I want to go on the X axis 6 feet. Okay. Easy enough. So a positive value moves you to the right. A negative value will move you to the left. Now you have to hit enter to lock that in. So I can go G, X axis minus 6 feet moves me back to where I was. And that works on all of your axes. All right. So I'm just trying to go over some of this stuff. Hopefully some of it sticks. Maybe you'll learn something you didn't know, or maybe you'll know something you didn't learn. All right. Either way, I just want to get some of this out there because it's all stuff that you're going to use on a very regular basis. All right. So just like Giant's Editor, we do have a gizmo. Now this gizmo, you can see it's just hanging out up there in the right-hand corner. Now, if you're ever doing some kind of crazy stuff like so, and now you have no clue what's up, what's down, there's no other like scene objects to use as a reference, so you don't know what's what. If you look at your gizmo here, Z should always be pointing up. So I'm upside down currently, so I can move myself right side up. And your X axis should always be pointing to the right, like so. And now I am in front orthographic view, basically. So if I hit 1, there I go. That's where I'm at. All right, so let me move that back up there. There we go. So that's a good thing about the gizmo. Now, if on other applications, like say with Giant's Editor or whatever 3D application you happen to be using, if you are more comfortable having the gizmo attached to your object, you can do that. So this is the way up here at the show gizmo. right? You can turn that off and on right up here. All right. Now, if you want it attached to the object, you can go down to the object gizmos and then you can turn that on. So you can do move, rotate, and scale. So if you're a little more comfortable moving objects around this way, you can certainly do that. That's not a big deal. All right. So you can attach that to the object itself. Now, just like any other application, you may or may not be familiar with this from FS22. That we have a local mode versus or global versus local as far as moving objects around, like in scaling things and stuff like that. So if I take this object, right, and I'm going to lift it up just a little bit and I'm going to hit R to rotate. Remember, everything has a shortcut. Everything does. If you want to rotate outside of like a shortcut, over here on your left-hand side has your basic functions, right? Here's your move function, your rotate, scale, and transform. All right, so if I want to rotate, I'm going to hit R to rotate. Now you can tell it what axis you want to rotate on, or you can freehand it just like moving it. All right, so now you can see that my gizmo is pointing in reference to the global axis, right? So it's pointing along the Y, the Z, and the X. Now, say if I want to scale this, right? So I hit S for scale, and I only want to scale it on the Y axis. Well, that's kind of weird. So it's scaling on the Y axis, but that's not what I want. I just want it to get longer, on its actual Y axis. So you can go up here and you can switch this to local, right? So I want it to get longer this way, right? So now I could actually scale it and I could tell it scale on the Y and it'll get bigger on the Y. All right. Now you don't have to go up there every single time that you want to change back and forth from global to local, right? So like I said, if I want to scale on the Y axis now and global, that's not really what I want. If you hit it twice, now I hit Y, let me get out of there just so I can show you. I'm hitting scale, Y axis. Now that's my global axis. If I hit Y a second time, that's puts me in my local axis. All right. So these things that are good to know because you're going to be rotating objects and doing stuff like that. And then it's going to goof you up when you can't figure out, how to either scale something or do some kind of operation on a local axis once things are rotated and moved around, right? Now, once you have things moved around here, if you want to reset it, let me get rid of that gizmo. It's driving me bonkers. Just like in Giants Editor, right? You can hit alternate G or reset all your transforms. Now you can see I'm back to 000 on my location and alternate R for your rotation. So I'm down to 000 on my rotation. So it was the very same thing in Giants Editor where you can kind of reset your rotation and your translation values back to 0. All right. So that's how you kind of reset things back to 000 if you feel like you need to. Okay. Now scale is going to be the next big thing, right? So if we scale an object using S for scale, you can see you can make that as big as you want. Looking on the right-hand side of my screen here, remember that's N in object mode to open and close this. Now you don't necessarily have to be in object mode. It will open and close, but it will give you different information inside of edit mode, right? So if you're looking for something specific and you can't find it, it could just be the mode that you're in. Maybe you're not in the right mode. All right. So you can see that I scaled this up to 20 feet, but now that has me on a scale of 3, 3, and 3. Now this will goof you up once you move into Giants Editor. Giants Editor pretty much keeps a 1-to-1 scale. So it's pretty good with that. So if you can pretty much ensure that if something's 20 feet tall, in Blender, it's going to look roughly 20 feet tall in the game. So with that being said, you can't just export things the way they are. Now, we're going to touch upon a lot of this later on. I just want to kind of throw this out there so you know what's going on. And also because it can goof up some operations. All right, so with the scale 3, 3, and 3, now say this 20 feet is as high as I want to keep it, right? That's going to be its default value now. It should be at a scale of 1. So what you can do is in object mode, right click, or actually, I'm sorry, don't right click. Don't listen to me. Hit Control A, right? And then we can apply the location, rotation, scale, and all transformations. Now, this is just like freeze transformations in Giants Editor, right? And in this case, I want to do the scale. So I'm going to basically freeze transformations on the scale. So that put me back to a scale of 1. All right. So now this will be okay to export. All right. I'll try to show you an example as we go along. Like say if I was to like try to like bevel this whole entire object here. Now it looks pretty good the way that it is, every now and then you'll try to do some sort of operation where it just doesn't look right, something doesn't seem right, and it's just driving you crazy. You can't figure out. Actually, you know what? That's probably why, because my scale has been reset. Let's try it with a scale like this. Like I said, things just don't seem quite right. Nah, it still looks okay. And it's because you changed your scale in object mode without resetting your transformations, without freezing your transformations, right? You know, whether that's scale or rotation or whatever. This will come up at some point during one of my tutorials, and I'll try and show you that as it comes up. But a lot of people have questions about scale, like how big do I make things? I don't know how to, to transfer this scale over, to Giants Editor. All right. And the thing with scale is, like I said, it's pretty much 1-to-1. So if you're going to make, like, say, a door, for example, you make that door as big as it would be in real life. What is it, about 7.5 feet tall, by, I don't know, 36 inches wide or so. And that's the scale that you would make it to. You would have, it's exactly how big you would build it in Blender. And then you would set your scale to 1. And when you export it to Giants Editor, things should look okay. All right. There's sometimes there's tools that you can use things for reference. I do have some, but I don't think I have it loaded on this version of Blender. And they're just like different objects you can use for scale. Maybe one is like a human being that's maybe 6 feet tall, 5 feet tall, what have you. And there's different objects that you just compare to one another for scale. So make sure things look right compared to one another. But overall, in the beginning, you don't have to be worried. Like, I've built entire houses and barns and things like that in real life would only be like 3 inches tall. Right. But I just scale them up before I'm ready to export. I get the overall height of my object. I scale it up to that height, freeze my transformations, export it, and I'm good to go. All right. And I'll show you all this stuff. So let's see. Like I said, we got into scale, so there's a shortcut for everything. Remember that everything's on the left-hand side here, S for scale. And again, you can scale on just a certain axis. Now, as far as like scale and doing some operations, like let's say I want to rescale this. Now, here is all my axes, right? Or axes. Now, I can scale on just the Y-axis if I want, and just the X-axis. But let's say that I wanted to scale on the X and the Y, but I didn't want it to get any taller. How do you think you would do that? Right. So you can try scale on Y and the X. Nope. That just changes axis. So that doesn't work. All right. So let me show you what you do there. You hit scale. All right. So S for scale, and you want to exclude a certain axis. So I want it to get bigger on the Y and the X, but not the Z. So hit Shift Z, and it will get bigger on the X and the Y, but not the Z. So Shift Z kind of excludes that axis from what you want to do. Okay. That's a lot. I'm trying to think of all the things that, like, basic things. One of the other things you can do, like as far as scale, is it? Yeah, it is that. Okay. If you hit your middle mouse button, right, it'll come up with like this little arrow that you have here and this little white line. Now I'm holding my middle mouse button in, and as I rotate it, you can see this little white line is lined up with, the Y-axis. So this is just another way that you can scale on different axes, right? It's sort of locking it in. And you can do that on every one of these axes, including, the Z-axis, the X-axis, Y-axis. I don't use that too much, but sometimes I just want to throw it out there. It's an option. So like I said, you can scale everything. R for rotate. Obviously, you can rotate things however you want, on whatever axis. You can rotate on the Z axis, right? And it takes a numerical input for everything. So you can rotate Z axis 90 degrees, enter, and there you go. All right. Now, these are very, very basic functions, which is, again, I just wanted to go over a few more of the basics. So, you're not left out to dry when it, comes time to really get into things here. Let's see what else. Now, adding mesh objects. Now we went through this. How about deleting objects, right? So if I have there's a couple different ways you can go about it. Like I said, in Blender, there's lots of different ways to do lots of different things. Or there's lots of different ways to do the same thing, actually. So with everything highlighted, I'm in edit mode. With everything highlighted, I can just press X. Now, X had asked me, what do you want to delete? Vertices, edges, faces, only edges and faces. I have everything highlighted, so I can just click faces and everything is gone. Okay. Object mode, obviously, I can just hit X and just tell it I want to delete as long as that object is highlighted. In the scene graph, I can have, or scene graph in the outliner up here, I can have the cube highlighted, just press delete and off it goes. I believe I can do that even down in here. Delete. Yeah, I can do that while I'm in the viewport also. So there's a lot of different ways to delete an object, right? Tons of different ways to delete an object. To bring an object in is Shift A, right? And then you can select the mesh that you want. We'll bring a cube back in. Now it doesn't always have to be Shift A. That's just the shortcut. You can go up here to where it says add, right? You can add a mesh. You can, add basically anything you want. Same thing that you got through the Shift A menu. You can get up here, right? Now to add another object, right? So we added a plane this time. Now you can see when I added that in object mode, it added a second object. So over here in my outliner, you can see I now have a cube and a plane, right? Easy enough. Now, if I happen to be in edit mode when I did that, right? And I went to add that plane, even without this highlighted, I add a plane. Okay. And I'll GY move it. It did not create a second object, even though you have two objects on the screen. They're all considered part of that cube. So to select all, these are both part of that cube, right? It's just kind of the way that works. But it's enough that it can goof you up. If you don't know, that it does that, and you try to add another object, you're looking for it and you can't see it, it can be a mess. So it's good to know that that's kind of the way things work as far as adding objects. Now you can select multiple objects. Like say if, I want to select, both of these objects, the cube and the plane. Now I could click on them to select them individually, not just a left click, or hitting shift, I can select multiples. Okay. Now I'll show you another thing as far as that's concerned, as far as selecting multiple objects. All right, so let me get into this mode here. I'm going to delete all my feeds. I'm going to delete that. Okay. Now that Shift Z that I'm doing there, all I'm doing is putting myself back and forth to this wireframe mode. Now Shift Z isn't a normal function. If you want to, if there's if there's a function that you use often, right, and you want to create a shortcut for it, right? So for up here in this wireframe mode, if you right click on it, you will have the option to assign a shortcut, right? So when you go on there, it tells you to press the key, press any key that you want to be the shortcut. Now I happen to put mine to, hopefully my escape key is okay. I forget where I was. So like I said, I assigned mine to, Alt Z, I don't know why I did, but it works. You can also assign things to the quick menu. How do I do that? Where's my quick menu? There is a quick menu. If you press Q, that's your quick menu. Right now I have subdivide is in my quick menu. How do I do that? I can't remember how to put it in my quick menu. Sign shortcut. Oh, I'll have to look that up. I'll have to look up how to put that back into my quick menu. All right. So what I wanted to show you here, let me get on this. Let's scale this a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to press S for subdivide. So for your last operation here, this box will pop up in the lower left-hand corner. When you perform an operation, it pops up and it gives you a bunch of settings that, like I just changed the number of subdivisions here. I changed that up to 10, right? This box that pops up. Now you're going to want to change a lot of things when you make certain objects. That box only appears as long as this operation, this is active, right? So when this object here is active,
that's when this box is up. As soon as I click outside this box and deactivate it, that box goes away, right? And there's no way to get it back. That's just kind of it. So if it's basic operations, you might be able to still perform some of the changes you wanted to make. If not, you'll just have to re-add that object so that box comes back up. Alrighty. Now, as far as selecting multiple faces, okay, so I'm in face mode here in 3, right, for select face mode. So individually, I can select faces, okay. If I want to select multiple faces, like I said, I can hit Shift, and that will let me hit multiple faces. I think about this the opposite of the way it is in Windows. In Windows, if you were to hit Shift, like you click one object, and when you hit Shift and click the next object, it would fill everything in between. And if you use Control in Windows, Control lets you select multiple objects, like Shift does here. But it's the opposite in Blender, right? So if I click this square here and I hit Control and I click all the way up top there, it fills in everything in between. So it's just a really quick way for you to be able to select multiple objects. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can select, lots of different objects. Now, I just hit C on my keyboard, and that changed the way that I'm actually right now. I'm just kind of painting my selections on. Like these are a lot of little things that I'm not really going to get into, like the whole nitty gritty part of it, like as far as like all the different ways that you have to select objects. I'm just going to give you some of the most basic ways. And like I said, you can go in, get into some other tutorials and stuff like that to kind of expand upon the basic knowledge I'm going to give you here. If not, I'm sure this tutorial can just get very large, very fast. All right. So I think for the most part, as far as moving objects, scaling, rotating, you should have a pretty good handle on that now. Now make sure if you're moving an object, so like now I have this subdivided, right? So I have this object. If I want to move it, G, I select all, A to select all, or I want to move the object. If you only have part of it selected and you hit G, you can see what happens there, okay? You're just pulling on the mesh. You're grabbing that mesh and yanking it. So you can think about it that way, all right? And like I said, Z to undo it. Now, if you want to extrude the mesh, now didn't really want to get into this in this tutorial, but that would be E for extrude. And you can tell what direction you want to extrude in. We're going to be doing a lot of that coming up, so don't you worry about that. Just make sure if you want to move an object, you're either in object mode, select the object, G to move, and then you can specify the axis if you want to. Or if you're in edit mode, then you make sure you select all before you move your object. Okay. If not, you're only going to move part of that object. So by now, like I said, you should be somewhat familiar with how to include new objects into your scene. And we're only going to be working with meshes right now. So actually, let me undo that. Let me get these selected. Let's delete those. Shift A. Like I said, we're only going to work with meshes. We're not going to get into the grids, monkeys, or any of these other things. Now, a lot of these entries here you may not have available to you because these are add-ons that I have enabled. And we will get to some of these, right? So there's a lot of different ways for, like I said, doing a lot of different things. And we'll try to cover the most basic. But for now, you should, like I said, at least I want you to be familiar with how to add objects into your scene and how to at least manipulate them as far as moving them around. You're comfortable grabbing something, moving it, spinning it if you need to, changing the scale, that type of thing, right? So like I said, I'm coming up on 30 minutes now and I want to keep this short. I don't want these to get out of hand, these videos. I just want to hit the very basics, quick, fast, in a hurry, get it done with, and then we can get on to the good stuff. All right. So hopefully you learned something out of that little mini tutorial there. Hopefully. And I'm just going to leave it at that. All right, guys. So good luck with everything. And with that being said, Bauer Brown, and I'll see you on the next one.